on the situation, but the way I have responded to that, because I've had a number of conversations with transgendered individuals, is that I use whatever pronoun seems to go along with the persona that they're.
This is all you have to do. Jordan Peterson, a doctor of psychology, Canadian free speech activist, Twitter user, very emotional man, apparently was threatened with his license by the college in which he received it from. It threatened apparently to revoke his license because of his unprofessional conduct on Twitter, and kind of offered him, it seemed like, to enroll not just in other classes, but kind of most likely, sorry about that, it seems like kind of enroll in some further education and some, classes to, when it comes to a discourse on the internet, to kind of secure his license, essentially. Let's just kind of see.
A bunch of people.
Oh, sorry. If you're not aware, this woman that you're seeing above me, this is Michaela Peterson, I guess his daughter. I don't even think I knew he had a daughter. No, I think I did know that. I don't. Yeah. Either way. So just in case you were wondering.
In power by the government, basically.
I don't even know what channel this is
threatening
on.
to take my dad's psychology.
Oh, this is literally her channel.
Because he's been criticizing the government. This isn't a joke. This has been torturing my family since 2018. Seriously bullying my dad in a way that.
Am I the only one? Ma'am, you have a very. Man, I can tell you're Jordan Peterson's son. You have that same raspiness, just without the Kermit, inflection.
Really caused everyone in my family a lot of stress. I think it's part of what contributed to him being quite ill in 2019, 2020.
Right.
Colleges are in charge of doctors, massage therapists, dentists. They've been around since about the 60s. And it turns out, which I guess
colleges have been around since the 60s.
They've been infiltrated by the government, and now it looks like they're being used to control particularly conservative.
Okay, we're gonna. Okay. Unfortunately, Michaela Peterson also inherited her father's inability to speak quickly. So,
think you can trust your doctor to talk to you about anything that the government doesn't back? Definitely not, although we probably already knew that. This is kind of how colleges work in part. So this is how bad it is. He's getting investigated because of tweets he's tweeted, personal tweets, opinions, things he said on Joe Rogan. It's such a scam, too. They're requiring him to do media retraining that he pays $225 an hour for an unspecified amount of time. And then at the end of that training, they decide whether or not he's learned anything and whether he can continue being a psychologist.
You mean almost like a college? I know, crazy thought. Almost like a call. You have to pay to be taught something and then are assessed on your acumen. Man, it's almost like college. Sorry, just updating. Figure I might as well Oh, I don't know how to spell license. God, I'm such a bad speller now. Actually, no, I was an okay speller growing up. That's a lie. I was going to say I've never been a great speller, but not too bad. Okay. So Jordan Peterson does a lot of tweeting. Jordan Peterson also does a lot of kind of uses his doctorate, uses his license as a legitimizing basically badge for his opinions. Essentially, like, what we hear a lot from Jordan Peterson is he's not a sociologist, he's not a statistical scientist, he is a psychologist. He is trained to talk to mostly individuals about their kind of psychological issues, right? Unfortunately, what Jordan Peterson has done on Twitter and through his media appearances since his prominence in, I think it was 2019, since he rose to prominence in opposing Bill C-16, which hasn't really amounted to much. It was what Bill C-16 essentially did was add transgender people to and terms and offensive terms one could use towards them, and added them kind of to hate crime laws. So, you know, if you're like refusing, like, you know, if you're dead naming or you're refusing to use somebody's proper pronouns and the pronouns that they live by, you're clearly doing it as kind of a offensive like attack towards them, in a way to kind of rhetorically, to verbally assault them in some kind of, in a way, kind of the same way, you know, you can't yell racial epithets at like other people. You shouldn't be allowed to basically misgender people purposefully. Now, what Jordan Peterson did was turn this into, got famous by, doing the whole like, over my dead body I'll let the woke Marxists do, take my rights or whatever, and like Jordan Peterson made a big stink about it because Jordan Peterson doesn't recognize the existence, the validity of trans people. Unfortunately, the scientific and medical communities disagree with him. He is in the big minority tent here, or I guess small minority tent. Either way, he's in the small camp of people when it comes to medical and psychological experts. And through his doctorate, he validates anti-trans rhetoric and anti-trans narratives through the use of his through the use of his doctorate, to basically kind of get away with making medical prescriptions and sociological prescriptions that he's not trained to make. So I do think there is something to be said about the misuse of his doctorate and the misuse of his license as a legitimizing factor. Now, should it be revoked? I'm a bit skeptical personally, but let's continue.
Psychologist. This isn't even a process that goes to court. It's just this regulatory board of like 12 tyrannical individuals. It's crazy that what you say online can be used to get rid of your license if people don't like you politically, which doesn't...
Well, yes. These also aren't... What Jordan Peterson is doing is not making political statements. He's justifying political prescriptions through medical, obfuscation. He's using his medical license to make political prescriptions, but his medical license does not give him any authority in the topics that he's speaking about. That's also the harm that he's creating through that.
Doesn't sound very democratic to me. They don't like his opinions, so they're trying to shut him down. But right now, it's in a very real way. The tweets they've identified as problematic include the tweet about Elliot Page. Dad's trying to protect kids from being sterilized. That's definitely not appropriate. The tweet about...
Yes. Would you want, the medical board would probably look at this, would look at this specific tweet and say to you, as a medical professional, you need to re-educate yourself or just further educate yourself on trans issues before you represent yourself as a medical practitioner in on the internet. That's at the end of the day, that's he uses his doctorate to give his uneducated opinions validity. So yeah, this is pretty I'd say pretty unprofessional, and rather I can see why the medical board would take a lot of issue with this.
Definitely not appropriate. The tweet about the obese woman on Sports Illustrated. Again, obesity should not be celebrated. It kills people. And then tweets criticizing Justin...
Sorry, go back for a second. I want to actually read the tweet.
Obesity should not be celebrated.
Oh, right. Let's see. Sorry, not beautiful, and no amount of authoritarian tolerance is going to change that. This is, again, I mean, this I wouldn't really put behind like his whole I'm a doctor, I get to say this, although there is an aspect to this where Jordan Peterson should be aware of body positivity as a psychologist. He should have an understanding of the body positivity movement and the ethos behind that. But he actively rejects those based on quite frankly not really a full understanding of weight and like health. This person is probably a bit overweight, if not just flat out quite overweight. That does not necessarily mean that they are unhealthy. It does mean that they are what's the word, disproportionately at risk of negative health outcomes or side effects. But in and of itself, carrying more weight on your body is not in and of itself unhealthy. I have extra weight on me. There's been assholes who come into the chat and think that that's some kind of own, that like I'm a bit overweight. I work also in a kitchen and walk around and lift and do quite a lot of physical activity as my job. So when I go to the doctor, I'm perfectly healthy. I'm very active, probably more active than most people who carry less weight on them than I do, but have sedentary jobs. The conversation around weight and health is a very contextual and complex one. It's not as straightforward as fat is unhealthy. It's just not. That's just unfortunately not how it works. And Jordan Peterson, as somebody who has a doctorate, who constantly says that they're a doctor, and they might be only a psychologist, but these are things he can educate himself on, that he refuses to do so. So he's still, again, using his doctorate, using his status as a medical practitioner to forward uneducated views of his.
Kills people, and then tweets criticizing Justin Trudeau and another member of the Liberal Party, threatening to take your job as a serious threat. Anybody can submit a complaint about a psychologist or a doctor for that matter. Anybody. Doesn't have to be a former client. So for Dad, it's random people on Twitter complaining about him. Out of his audience of 20 million, he has 12 complaints. The college could throw these complaints out.
Also, can we talk about also at the end of the day, like, one second, I need to go back and hear what she said. I want to make sure I heard.
Twitter complaining about him. Out of his audience of complaint about a psychologist or a doctor, criticizing Justin Trudeau and another member of the Liberal Party, threatening to take your job as a serious threat.
That's what I was thinking. First of all, has Jordan Peterson been practicing psychology since his rise to prominence? Now, I'm not 100% sure. I don't know. But to my knowledge, Jordan Peterson has not been practicing psychology since his rise to prominence back in 2018, 2019. So what are we talking about then? Because you can't say he's taking away his job. Jordan Peterson's job is not to practice psychology anymore. Jordan Peterson's job is to forward, is to write books, which you don't need a doctorate to do so, to give speeches at right-wing organizations and at right-wing gatherings. You also don't need a doctorate for that. Like, what part of losing his doctorate affects him in, like, materially? Nothing. He doesn't, that's not the thing that he does anymore. He's not even working in schools anymore. So, threatening someone's job, they're not threatening his job. They're threatening his license to practice, because he has continued to show himself to be somebody who is not interested in educating themselves enough to understand the science. If a doctor goes out there and spouts a bunch of anti-vax nonsense, you would be in the right. It would make sense to revoke that person's license to practice medicine, because they do not buy in to the medical consensus. They have gone from practicing the medical consensus above board and with an understanding that the rest of the medical community has done the research, has presented their all of their information that's been peer reviewed, and conclusions have been drawn from that. And if as a medical professional you're just not, you think, no, this person doesn't need ibuprofen for their headache, they need like, they need they need an exorcism or something, then no, I got no interest in you being one of the, being a doctor or any of this shit. You're not, at the end of the day, you can go do that. You can go and give advice that's not medical at that point, because you're dangerous. You run the risk of people taking you seriously and dying due to that.
The college could throw these complaints out, but instead they're threatening him and have been for years, wasting his time, bullying him, and threatening to take his license. Maybe we'll do a podcast about it. I'm not entirely sure what to do here other than tell people about what's going on, but maybe complaining back at them is appropriate. You can go to the link. I'm going to link it below.
You could.
And you can enter
You
in
could
a
do
complaint
that.
about the college itself. And
I believe in people's rights to bitch and moan.
Bullying and harassing my family. So I don't know where the protection there is. Where's the protection against a tyrannical organization that's set in place to protect the government? This is basically the communist.
Well, actually, they're not to protect the government. They're there to protect the population from people distributing dangerous medical information under the guise of medical consensus. Like that is kind of the problem.
Communist Union at this point, picking on a professor for his opinions on Twitter against the government. It's absurd.
Can we stop pretending that Jordan Peterson is not
really be hard on my dad. You won't be able to trust your doctor, your lawyer, anybody figure in Canada if the government
he's not just a,
God forbid.
Let's be clear. Jordan Peterson is not just a professor anymore. Like, he does speaking engagements at like large institutions.
You tweet out your opinion about the government, you might have your license taken away or be subject to their 1984 media retraining that you pay for. Oh my gosh. On their website, it says anyone who has a concern about a psychologist or psychological associate can file a complaint or submit a report. This includes a client, a family member, or friend of the client, an employer, an insurer, a colleague, or a general member of the public.
Maybe that's one. I need a screen that's like up here
for celebrities, because no one's going to go after them randomly on Twitter. You can't just complain about the college.
Then again, my camera's a little offset, so
but
there's
look
also
at here. It shows who's running this scam right on their website, according to this guy on Twitter.
You mean like maybe we should ask the council themselves? I mean, yeah. You mean doctors, like you mean other psychologists who think that, wait, no, this actually is worse for your argument, ma'am. I'm sorry to let you know that. But like having a string of other psychologists say like, hey, the stuff that he's pushing is actively, first of all, unfounded scientifically, but also damaging to the ability of people to to like practice, and for patients to feel safe enough to go and seek help. Like, yeah, it's not great.
These are the people, you can see it right on their website,
Go
running
dox them,
this
essentially.
organization that's currently threatening my dad. Even Elon's responded to dad's tweet, which was really a tweet for help, in all honesty, because we're not sure what to do here. Obviously, he's not going to be doing their media retraining.
You can probably just
scary.
appeal
it's not a
it.
good idea to make a video to tell you what's going on. It's
I would also love, you know what they really should do? They should really like post on Twitter like the media training, because it's probably like, hey, don't go out there and push unfounded science and label like trans people as diseases. As a psychologist, you should know that that's damaging, because with any other group you would come to that you would understand that with any other group. So, Jordan Peterson all day will go on his fucking soapbox and complain about men having it tough. Meanwhile, he like dehumanizes trans people on like a weekly basis. And does it with the legitimacy of somebody with a doctorate in psychology. So
It's crazy, and we could use some help here. He's tweeted out, the Ontario College of Psychologists has demanded that I submit myself to mandatory social media communication retraining with their experts, among other crimes, retweeting Pierre Poilievre and criticizing Justin Trudeau and his political allies. This is real. This is actually happening. I've been accused of harming people, although none of the complainants involved in the current action were clients of mine, past or present, or even acquainted with any of my clients. I'm to take a course of such training.
How many of his clients does he even have at this point?
With reports documenting my progress, or face an in-person tribunal and suspension of my right to operate as a licensed clinical psychologist. About a dozen people from all over the world submitted complaints about my public statements on Twitter and Rogan over a 4-year period out of the 15 million who follow me on social media, claiming that I had harmed, not those people, just harmed people with his views. And then here they are. You can go to College of Psychologists of Ontario. There's the council and the professional members. Feel free to submit complaints about them. Ridiculous. Guess we'll see if my dad continues to be a clinical psychologist.
I guess we'll see. Yeah, I mean, Jordan Peterson is somebody who I don't really think kind of really needs their license whatsoever. But B, if he's using his license, you're one of these weird political people. I am one of those weird political people. Are you one of these weird political people? I am in like the BLM type. Are you a BLM type, or are you asking me if I'm a BLM type? What the frick is that? Bye-bye. What a loser. Anyway, as I was saying, got a lot of losers today in chat, right? Anyway, as I was saying, Jordan Peterson is somebody who, like, again, Jordan Peterson passes off pretty much all of his unfounded, or not unfounded, all of his political opinions as like science and based on his psychological background. Meanwhile, be fit and health conscious, we're in a pandemic. Meanwhile, passing off like all of this, like, all of his anti-trans stuff as what's the word? As like medical consensus, or as any kind of like with some kind of medical founding. It's why they're threatening his license mostly. It's just because he says shit like this. Trains are awesome.
C-16 purported to do nothing but extend human rights provisions to an excluded group, let's say, to the transgender and non-gender binary types. And that was the federal legislation. It also made it a hate crime to discriminate or harass, essentially. So now then the question is, well, what exactly do you mean by discriminate or harass? And why exactly is that a hate crime under the criminal code? Well, there was an answer to that. The answer was...
Wait, is he asking why there's hate crimes? I think it's fairly obvious why we have hate crimes.
As well, this bill will be interpreted in light of the policies generated by the Ontario Human Rights Commission, very large set of policies. Now, the Ontario Human Rights Commission is a radically leftist organization. I think it's the most dangerous organization in Canada, although you could debate that. And they set all sorts of policies about how this legislation was going to be interpreted, and the federal government linked to their website to state that Bill C-16 would be interpreted in light of those guidelines. So I went and read all the policies. Well, one of the policies was that if you didn't use the preferred pronouns of a given group, that you could be charged essentially with a hate crime. And I thought, no,
makes sense. If you're like actively, if there's somebody who's trans and you're actively misgendering them, then yeah, that's it's about the closest thing you can get to basically yelling the N-word at somebody. So yeah, I mean, yeah, makes sense. That would make sense as a hate crime.
Given group is that
using hateful language?
Yeah, and so there's all these pronouns that have come up. There's 70 different sets of pronouns approximately to hypothetically describe people who don't fit anywhere on the gender spectrum, which is also something that I don't really understand. I don't understand that conceptually.
Well, Jordan, you could, I don't know, seek more education, and maybe seeking more education would give you would shed some light on this perspective that you seem to lack. Just a thought.
Like,
We'll come to that. But
Yeah,
I just
but
want to
the
hear
point
the
is,
story of this
well,
bill first.
okay, so now a person is compelled under Canadian law to use the pronoun of another individual's choice on pain of law.
Right.
And I thought, well, no, that's not acceptable. It's one thing to put limits on what a person can't say, like say with hate speech laws, which I also don't agree with, by the way, but that's a different argument. I think it's a narrower argument. But to compel me to use a certain content when I'm formulating my thoughts or my actions under threat of legislative action, I thought, no, what's happened there is
So also keep in mind, nobody has been sent to prison for this. The thing he's worried about has not happened. Mainly because the police are not like, what's the word? The police are not like, holding out their ear to the street. They're not putting their ear to the street and like waiting for the fucking vibrations of you saying she to a trans man and then whipping out their fucking Glock 17 and running after you. That's not what's happening here. What this is more or less is just writing in the rules adding into the hate crime speech as misgendering people, which is not okay. If you misgender somebody, they correct you, you go, oh, my bad. You do it a few more times and you're doing it as like an accident. The police aren't going to come and arrest you. It's if you approach somebody or if in public you're just yelling somebody's incorrect gender at them because you oppose the idea of them being a different gender, that's a hate crime. It's rather simple. It's not really all that hard to understand. And again, these laws aren't enforceable on the minute by minute basis. If you did this, like that trans person might go to the police nearby if there are police nearby, or if you're harassing them at their home, then they'll go, hey, can you come talk to this person? They're like harassing me. And the cops will probably show up and be like, hey, chill out, go the fuck home, take it easy. But yeah, and that hasn't happened yet. Even that hasn't happened yet.
The government has introduced compelled speech legislation into the private sphere. It's never happened.
It's funny, Vampire Hunter, you say perpetuate insanity like you have any medical grounding for that. It's funny. I don't think you have any kind of educational background to identify actual insanity. So just like Jordan Peterson, maybe educate yourself and then come talk to me about this.
In the history of English common law. And so I said, there's no way I'm abiding by that. I don't care what your damn rationale is. We're compassionate. It's like, no, you're not. No, you're not. You're playing this radical collectivist left-wing game. You're trying to gain linguistic supremacy in the area of public discourse. You're doing that using compassion as a guide. And you're pulling the wool over people's eyes. And you're not going to do it with me.
If I was sitting here in front of you as a transgendered male to female or female to male.
Why is the host? Dude, you run this show. Why is your mic so low? What is wrong with you?
Began the conversation. At the beginning of the conversation, you stumbled and called me he or she, and I was perhaps identifying the other way around. And then if I'd said to you, please, I'd rather go by she. How would you respond to that on a personal level? How would you?
Well, it would depend on the situation, but the way I have responded to that, because I've had a number of conversations with transgendered individuals, is that I use whatever pronoun seems to go along with the persona that they're.
This is all you have to do. Holy shit. This is literally all people are asking. This is it. This is the entire ask, Jordan. This is the entire bit of it. Oh my god. Oh my god. Jesus Christ.
They're projecting publicly. It's the simplest thing to do. Now, if we were...
It's rather simple, isn't it? Isn't it, Jordan? Isn't it? Jesus Christ. It's not hard. He just said it's not hard. And he just said he doesn't normally. Ben Shapiro's already made the same concession. that at the end of the day, in an interpersonal setting, if somebody informs you, hey, I actually use she, her pronouns, if you could refer to me as those, I'd appreciate it. They've already admitted from an interpersonal level, this isn't hard, and it's pretty reasonable and the decent and good thing to do. But of course, that's not what their audience wants. That's not like what Vampire Hunter over here is kind of demonstrating, is for whatever reason their audiences are more interested in labeling certain people with mental illnesses that aren't actually mental illnesses, because they're weirded out by trans people. I've still yet to get a good answer as to what people's opposition is to using people's pronouns. I don't get it. It's very odd.
I would respect their choice on an individual level.
Yeah. But with a more contentious pronouns, je and je, and that sort of thing, that's a whole different issue. Because the question there is, well,
What's
exactly what is it that you're doing when you're asking me to use those words? Like, are you
literally the exact same thing? You're just making different vibrations with your voice, my friend.
Are you compelling me to play your particular ideological game, or is this actually a matter of some personal identity that's important to you? And those things are not obvious. And so, in a situation like that,
you could just ask, like, if it's just important to them, it's just important to them as a person. Not every trans person is concerned with the campaign of trans rights and trans identity. Most trans people, like most people, I think, just want to live comfortably in their communities. That's really it.
The first thing I'd have to do is to try to figure out just exactly what was going on in the situation, and that's not simple. And so there would be no foregone conclusion that I would address you by the pronouns of your choice. And the first thing I'd want to find out is
extra work to go from her to
power play, because that's actually the most likely outcome.
Is it that much extra work? If it's not meaningful to you, then is it important? And if it is for them, don't you think it's the decent and polite thing to do? I don't think it's that hard. But Jordan Peterson, at the end of the day, Jordan Peterson will either have his license revoked or he won't. It seems like there's a good chance he probably will end up having his license revoked, simply for the fact that he's kind of demonstrating no ability to be curious about the topics that he's speaking on. He's not very well read, it seems, on trans issue, on trans identity, and for that he just kind of says whatever stuff he thinks. Like, it's all about whatever feels nicest to him and what already fits into his worldview. And again, the dangerous part of that is that he uses his doctorate, he uses his medical license as a legitimizing badge, basically, for his uneducated views. So, he either will or he won't. Maybe get a little bit more education on these topics. The thing that they tell, like at the end of all YouTube videos where they tell you to like click on one of these like things to watch more videos. Yeah, I've been meaning to film one of those. So that's what I was doing. I was just setting it up to